Could any team really trade for Tarik Skubal? Did the Braves have the worst deadline of any contender? And as usual, we'll go around the horn and turn back the clock on this week's episode of the Winning Season with Seth G. I'm your host, Seth G, and let's jump right into this week's big story. So we obviously had the trade deadline come up, and I want to get into the Tarik Skubal piece. So before I get into the Dodgers and Tarik Skubal and what happened, I was I think surprised the word I would use, with a lot of, I guess I would say the way that the national media covered this story. Honestly, I felt like most of it was, I hate to use this word, but I would say lazy. The coverage of it I thought was very poor, ignoring a lot of parts of this whole issue. Really with the Dodgers in general, which I'll get into in just a minute, I think was just some lazy reporting and obviously some criticism that followed for certain teams that, again, certainly was not warranted. So let's start with this question. And I feel like Tarik Skubal himself even said it, and I think it was the talking point of the national media was like, hey, anybody could have traded for Tarik Skubal. Well, yeah, I guess that is technically true. And certainly on the surface, you could say that. But again, I think it's very lazy to sit back today and say, well, anybody could have traded for him. So, it's not a Dodger problem. It's not an MLB problem. Maybe further down the road, it's not a CBA problem. It's just the Dodgers were willing to go for it and no other teams were. But I would say that's again, a lazy way to look at it and completely ignores the much larger story around Tarik Skubal, the Dodgers, and how this is playing out. So let's get into that. So, right off the bat, let's just start with the flaw in the argument that anyone could have traded for Tarik Skubal. So it ignores, number one, that his agent has already leaked that his preferred destination is the Dodgers. Now, let's understand what you're getting in Tarik Skubal. If you trade for him at the trade deadline, as the Dodgers did, you essentially are going to get about 10 games out of Tarik Skubal. Okay? Obviously not an everyday player. There's not a lot of season left. He is not going to have that big of an impact in the regular season for you because he's not going to get many starts. Now, of course, if you're going to the postseason, yes, okay, you're going to get a few more starts out of him in the postseason. So let's start with the two teams I think were heavily criticized because, quote unquote, they didn't go for it, and that's the Milwaukee Brewers and the Tampa Bay Rays. Well, I think that's very unfair to both of those teams because those teams walk into that knowing whatever I give up is for a 10-game rental, plus what I get in the playoffs. That's it. You're not going to re-sign Tarik Skubal. His agent's already made it clear that he would prefer to be in LA. And, of course, the Dodgers are going to offer him some ridiculous sum of money that no other team is going to even really probably be willing to consider. See Kyle Tucker. And certainly a team like Milwaukee and Tampa in their markets, they can't afford to pay that kind of money for a guy who takes the mound once every 5 days. So, on the surface, sure, you could say that the Brewers and Rays could have done more. But again, makes zero sense. Those guys are being asked to give up their very best prospects, their farm system, pipeline for small market teams for a couple of month rental. The Dodgers aren't dealing with that. And I want to spend a few minutes today getting into why the Dodgers aren't dealing with that. And it's not because they're the best organization in baseball, which seems to be the national media's take. Dave Roberts is just such a great manager. Gomes and Friedman are the best executives in baseball. Again, lazy. It ignores what's really happening with the Dodgers and what's kind of allowed this to happen. And it's going to be a huge, huge impact. And it's going to be exhibit 1 in the CBA of why something's got to be done about the owners are going to argue it needs to be a salary cap. The players are going to argue it's something else. But I want to get into this idea that, the Dodgers are just the best at everything. And they somehow managed to always pull this off because, again, there's much more to that story, and they are playing with an extremely unfair advantage. So let's just get into what that advantage is and how this works, right? So right off the bat, let me just start with what their television deal is. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this kind of in the, maybe a little bit gray, but I want to be specific about what's happening here. So the first thing is they have a 25-year deal, okay, worth $8.3 billion with Spectrum. So let's start there. They have a massive television deal. Good for them. Huge fan base. Massive TV market. They're one of the most popular teams in all of sports. Get it. Nothing wrong with that, right? But this is where it gets very interesting. So in 2012, in a federal bankruptcy case, the settlement allowed the Dodgers to calculate their MLB revenue sharing contribution using an extremely heavy discount. Okay, so to be specific about that, they only have to, I'm going to use the word claim, $130 million a year of their television contract. But, and this is key, they get $334 million a year with their television contract. Okay, so just that alone saves them $50 to $60 million a year in revenue sharing. Again, well, how in the world can you give Kyle Tucker that kind of money? Well, right off the bat, you're getting a huge chunk of money that in any other team in all of baseball that had this, it would go into revenue sharing, but not the Dodgers. They get to keep it going back to this bankruptcy hearing that at this point is 14, 15 years ago. Okay, so that's number one. From a TV revenue standpoint in baseball, the number's around 48% of teams' TV revenue that goes into the pool that's then equally shared with everybody. And again, I will call out, except the Los Angeles Dodgers. Okay, so the other thing I would also mention that in 2012, when that was capped, I think all of you know that today's TV deals are massively larger than they were in 2012. So even the cap they set for them, excuse me, is a very, very low cap compared to what teams get today from a TV market standpoint. Now, this allows the Dodgers essentially to shield about $100 million a year in TV revenue from the league revenue sharing pool. Okay, now this is what's really interesting. That gives the Dodgers over $1 billion of the life of their contract that they do not have to share in the revenue pool the way every other team has to, again, except the Dodgers. Now, think about that. I said $1 billion, that is with a B. It is going to save them $1 billion. And save is probably not the right word. What I would tell you is it's giving them $1 billion more to spend that they do not have to share with all the rest of the teams. And I want to reiterate, no other team in Major League Baseball has this deal. It is only the Dodgers. Now, let's go a step further, because the other thing that's been talked about over the last couple of years, because the Dodgers have become the kings of this, is deferred money. Okay, so listen to these numbers. These numbers are staggering. The Los Angeles Dodgers have roughly between $1.1 and $1.3 billion of deferred salary right now. Okay, I'm going to say that again, $1.1 to $1.3 billion of deferred salary. Okay, now that's interesting, because they're going to save about $1 billion that they're not sharing. They got about $1 billion of deferred revenue. And just for perspective, the other 29 teams in Major League Baseball combined have less deferred salary than the Dodgers do as a single team. And more importantly, the Dodgers have $800 million more of deferred salary compared to the next closest team in baseball. Now, what advantage does that give them? Well, I won't bore you guys with all the math, but it gives them a really big break in the luxury tax market, because they only have to take a percentage of that. There's a lot of things about, they assume that when they're paying this money 10 years later, the money's going to be worth less, inflation, blah, blah, blah. But essentially what this equates to, and it's really funny when you break it down, it basically gives them another $24 million a year that they're not paying in luxury tax that they would be if all this money wasn't deferred. And interesting, when you break it down, that breaks down to about $130,000 a day they can spend more, and especially for off-season moves like people like Tarik Skubal and anybody else that they want to acquire. They get additional, or they have additional money because of the way they've deferred salaries. Now, let me also say this. Shame on Major League Baseball. The Dodgers aren't doing anything wrong. Okay, they're not cheating. This is not a Houston Astros situation. They're playing by the rules that they've been given. I think what's critically important here is that they are playing by a different set of rules than the other 29 teams that everybody in the national media wants to ignore. So, good on the Dodgers. It's great for them. They are a very good organization, extremely well run. I think most people are very frustrated by it because you wish your team had the same deal the Dodgers did so that they could spend the way the Dodgers do and get this crazy collection of a bunch of superstars all on one team. And now they go out and they add the best pitcher, certainly available at the deadline, one of the best pitchers in baseball. And everybody outside of LA and the national media is like, hey, this is foul. Like, this can't be the way this game is run. But again, I want to be clear. The Dodgers aren't breaking any rules. Good on them. They're taking advantage of it. But they are certainly getting to play by a very, very different set of rules. And it just so happens that, again, they have a massive television deal, which, hey, great, they deserve. They've got a huge fan base. They're not doing anything nefarious. They're not doing anything illegal. They're not cheating. They're not breaking any rules. But certainly they're playing by a different set of rules. So then what happens is that a Tarik Skubal ends up on the Dodgers, right? Which certainly, you could argue whether that's good for baseball or not. And then certainly I was very frustrated by this. Well, anybody could have done it. Dodgers are just a better organization. Not true. Not true at all. That is like saying, well, anybody can win the lottery. Well, true, anybody can, but you would have to play, and then the odds are really stacked against you. And teams like the Brewers certainly sounds like they were making some aggressive offers on Tarik Skubal, but at the end of the day, that he ends up in LA, which I think I predicted a week or two ago is where he was going to end up for all the reasons I just mentioned. And I just think it's not a good look for sports journalism when the consensus is anybody could have done it. So the Dodgers are just the best team in baseball. That's not really reading out the whole story. So, with that being said, the Dodgers have played absolutely awful over the last 2 weeks. They're on quite the losing streak, and it's baseball. So the beauty of this game, it's why I fell in love with it a long time ago. It's why I love it more than probably any other sport out there. It guarantees nothing. Baseball is the one sport that has been shown over and over again. You can't always just buy championships. Do I think they should stop the season and give the Dodgers a championship? Nope, I don't. I absolutely do not. There's a great probability they won't win a championship this year, like every other team in baseball. But certainly I think it's very fair to make sure that people understand that they are getting to play by a little different set of rules. No fault of their own, you could argue, their own. But again, this is where Major League Baseball's allowed this to go on. Certainly, I think you could set it at the feet of Rob Manfred. And it's one of several examples of why we probably won't have a season next year, or we will certainly miss some type of significant time. Because I think you've just got too many other fan bases and too many other owners and teams going, hey, we can't compete with that, so something's got to be done. Here coming up over the next few weeks, we'll probably get into a little bit more of the CBA. Not a lot of news coming out of that, but certainly the owners are going to continue to stand on. This is why there's got to be a salary cap. Players, of course, are going to be like, no, it's free market. Everybody should get paid what they want to. I might suggest that maybe you fix the deferred money problem, you fix the Dodgers television deal, and you might be able to even the playing field without having to worry too much about a cap. But certainly we'll let Major League Baseball lawyers and MLBPA kind of figure that out. But I certainly want to make sure that I shared kind of what's really affecting Los Angeles, and good on them. Certainly I'd love for my team to get a whole bunch of extra revenue that we don't have to share, and get to spend that in some cases recklessly on free agents the way they have in LA. But that's the current state. And again, I highly suspect that they will sign Skubal to some ridiculous extension, and I certainly would think they would want to do that before the CBA, because I'm going to assume that stuff's going to get grandfathered in, and so I'm sure that that will be a story here in the near future. So anyway, Tarik Skubal's with the Dodgers now. We're going to see how they play, but certainly they've not been playing well recently. But again, that's a team that's focused heavily on October. So that's going to lead us into our next segment, because I think October is quickly getting here. And I want to talk about, did the Braves have the worst trade deadline of any contender? Now, as I've said on past episodes, I'm not shy about this. I'm pretty biased about my teams. And I got to be honest, this is one of the more disappointing trade deadlines that I can recall as a fan. Alex Anthopoulos' inability to get pitching help over the last year and a half, which, by the way, he publicly has said many times, we got to get help. And his inability to do that, I find to be criminal. And I know the fan base was disappointed would probably be a light way to say it here as the trade deadline unfolded and ended. Added a couple of pitchers. Certainly on the surface, you would argue none of them are impact pitchers. Malley looked great last night. Honestly, pitched really well in New York. But again, is that who you're going to roll out there to go against? For example, the Dodgers starting pitching in the playoffs. You just can't sit back and say that's a key for success. I think the other thing too that's interesting is that I've listened to Anthopoulos answer questions, the Atlanta media. People tend to kind of keep living on like, well, but look how well they're playing. Look how great their record is. They've got a big lead. Like, this team can win the World Series. Those are two pretty different things. Yes, the team is playing well. Yes, they're in a good position. It would take an epic collapse for them to not make the playoffs. Sure. Of course. I think everybody would agree with that. This is also a team that has not won a playoff series since they won the World Series in 2021. This is a team that's had good regular seasons, but the reality is that if you look at this Braves team, are you going to put Bryce Elder out there to start Game 2 in a playoff series? That's where you think this team is going to win? And again, Bryce Elder's had a good season. Nothing against Bryce Elder. But when you look at that pitching staff, and let's eliminate Chris Sale for a moment, I just don't know how you go into a trade deadline and think this team has enough to win it all. I think what this team has is more than enough to get to the playoffs. Maybe they can win a series, although I would argue in a short series, I'm not sure, because they really, truly at the moment have one playoff level frontline starting pitching. So the best thing that could happen is they get a rain out at 4 days between every game and Chris Sale can start every game. If that doesn't happen, the odds of this team going very deep in the playoffs, I think are pretty short. And I think what's concerning about the trade deadline and concerning about the path that Anthopoulos took, I don't think there's anybody that, if they're being honest, would disagree with what I just said. He knows it, the team knows it, and yet we failed to do anything at the deadline. Now, there's been reports the last 2 days that he did try to get Skubal and he did try to get DeGrom. Okay, so if the path was we put all our eggs in those two baskets and didn't have a backup plan, then again, shame on Anthopoulos, right? It's got to be more than that. And then what's starting to happen with this team, and unfortunately we saw it last night in New York, the bullpen is starting to not be the bullpen it's been for the front half of the year, which has been arguably the best back end in baseball and been really good. Suarez is hurt. He's been hurt for a while. There doesn't seem to be any timeline of his return. I suspect it won't be anytime soon. Iglesias has had to pitch a lot more. Dylan Lee's had to pitch a lot more. Iglesias has not been good over the last few weeks. Kind of reminiscent of last year. He went through this spell last year where he wasn't very good. He cost him the game last night. But if you look at, I think I just saw the other day, over the last couple of weeks, his ERA is up to 5. He's given up runs. The back end of that bullpen is really stretched. You don't have an answer. You're not getting Suarez back. You didn't make moves at the deadline to help. And really, really tough to sit back and say, hey, that trade deadline was anything but a train wreck. And again, I feel like this has been a theme this week. I listen to some of the mainstream media. They've defended Anthopoulos. They act like, this team's built to win. They're good enough. I just don't know how you can sit back and see that, to the point that even CJ Nikowski on Twitter is almost being very smug with fans, acting like, fans don't know what you're talking about. Everything's great. We're just rolling on. And it's like, well, I get you get paid by them, but I just don't think that you can say that. As a matter of fact, I think Jeff Francoeur is the only person, connected with that franchise in some way that just said, hey, I was surprised and disappointed. And again, I struggle with Anthopoulos. There's a lot of things that are hanging over him right now besides the trade deadline. The Jackson Profar thing's been a total disaster. The Kim offseason signing has turned out to be a complete disaster. And you begin to think, is this a team that, hey, they got lucky in 21 with the trade deadline moves? Because quite frankly, those were all a bunch of little pieces. We're just going to throw in here and see what happens. Did that team just get hot at the right time? And Anthopoulos has been riding that here over the last 5 years. I'm starting to suspect the answer is yes. And I'm certainly very concerned for the Braves. And Anthopoulos has got to do better. And then I think lastly, I would just say, if this team does go out early in the playoffs, if they don't win a playoff series, if I'm the Braves, I think you've got to really look hard around moving on from Anthopoulos. Because a couple of things, you had $20 million extra bucks to spend because of Profar being suspended and not having to pay him. Your farm system's in great shape. You got plenty of prospects out there, and to quite frankly, generally speaking, do nothing but move Eli White and Joey Bart to free up some roster space. To bring back, by the way, Kim and Murphy, who I'm not even so sure that was the right decision either. It just really keeps you scratching your head. So we'll see how that plays out as well here over the next month or two. But again, I think it's tough to look at that deadline for the Braves and think it was anything short of a disaster. And quite frankly, they're I don't think they're not any better today than they were before the deadline. They are playing well, which is great to see. But this isn't about the regular season. This is about what they're going to do in October. There's been a lot of posts about, well, if they played this team, look at what the starting pitching matchups would be, and you'd be tough. You'd be tough to look at those and think they've got any chance of winning those series. So we'll certainly see how that plays out. All right, let's move on to Around the Diamond this week. Talk about who's hot and who's not. So first up, Pete Crow Armstrong's been on a tear. Been one of the hottest players in baseball. 409 over the last week, 510 on base percentage. Slugging 1.3. He's been phenomenal. A lot of people talking about him being a serious contender for the MVP in the National League, and he's been on quite the heater, which has been pretty incredible to watch. And then the Boston Red Sox, right? They're 9-1 in their last 10. They're 32-8 over the last 40 games. And I've even seen some people the last couple of days saying, hey, this team's got to be cheating. Like this reeks of the Astros back in the day. This team is on an incredible streak. I'm certainly not suggesting they're cheating. But man, what a run they've been on, and really got themselves into contention. And playing great and continue to. So continue to watch how the Red Sox navigate through the rest of the season. Obviously got a couple teams there in the American League East that they're going to be trying to chase down, the Yankees and Rays, and certainly trying to get one of those wild card spots. On the cold side, for as hot as Pete Crow Armstrong has been, his teammate Ian Happ, 0 for 19 this week. He did manage to score a run for, I believe, the one time he got on base with the walk, but he's really been struggling at the plate. And then from a team perspective, the A's 1-9 in their last 10. They've lost 9 in a row. And the A's started out well this season. They were kind of hanging around 500, which certainly in their division is competitive this season. And they've really had a tough couple of months. Certainly been hit by injuries. But I think I don't know. I almost get the feeling like that team just kind of needs to get to Vegas and get settled into an actual home. But been a tough back half of the year so far. I think everybody knows they've got a lot of good young pieces. Again, they've definitely been battling some injuries. But like to see them do some stuff this offseason to really position themselves as they go into their new home to be successful and be highly competitive. And again, they're in a division where a few pieces probably would get them into that, but really been struggling lately. And again, as they've kind of battled through injuries and stuff, it's just kind of been a tough season for the A's. All right, and then I think what's been becoming one of, I know certainly mine and some listeners' favorite segment of the show, let's turn back the clock this week. So this one really kind of hit home for me because I wasn't aware of kind of a little bit of the backstory for it. But August 5th in 1921, this week, Harold Arlen performed the first live radio broadcast of a Major League game. He called the Pirates win over the Phillies on KDKA from Forbes Field. And one of the reasons why this story hit home for me is that I think I mentioned it on a previous episode. I really, really love to listen to the game of baseball on the radio. There's just something a little bit nostalgic about it, but I think baseball, more than any sport, is just works so perfect on the radio. A lot of sports are tough to listen to on the radio sometimes. But man, there's something about baseball that it really brings it out. And the guys that are really good at it, I just feel like they can take you through a game. And as they're walking through it on the radio, you can visualize everything that's happening. And I just think it's such an incredible thing. And so to hear that, it was this week that the first time that ever happened, certainly hit home with me. And really enjoy baseball on the radio. I listen to it on the radio a lot. I listen to it intentionally on the radio, even when I have television in front of me, just because I really enjoy the game. And it makes me think back to a kid going to games where, at the time what I would view as the older people that were probably my age, sitting there with their scorebook, keeping score with their earpiece in, listening to the game broadcast on the radio. I think it's really cool. I remember my dad talking about him and his dad sitting on the back porch and listening to the Cardinal games on the radio. So I think there's always been kind of this nostalgia around the idea of games on the radio in baseball, and to kind of see that it happened for the first time this week in 1921 was really cool. It's interesting too. So he called the game from a box seat in the stand. So obviously he wasn't sitting in a booth; he was down in the stands, and really kind of forever changed how we consume sports going forward, although I'm sure they couldn't have envisioned that at the time. And Harold Arlen was a 25-year-old electrical engineer at the time from Westinghouse Electric. It's interesting, he'd only recently become the world's first full-time radio announcer after reading the 1920 presidential election results over the airwaves. So this was kind of a new thing for America, just in general. Started with the presidential election and then moved on to baseball. He had to make his own microphone from an old telephone receiver. Obviously, this kind of equipment like that wasn't developed yet because it was kind of something that was new. And a couple other things too. Listenership for the experiment was really small. Back then, very few households even had commercial receivers. And Westinghouse actually distributed radios to its own employees so they could listen to it because the audience was going to be so small. And then this is kind of interesting. Stations initially thought that it was a kind of a crazy stunt to boost ratings, and the owners actually really were scared of it because they were afraid that doing it over the air would keep people from buying tickets and coming to the game, which I'm sure happened when television came along. Well, if they can watch it on TV, nobody will show up. And so that even existed back in 1921 when first time going to get it on the radio. And Arlen had to heavily advocate to his superiors to keep sports on the air, even offered to resign if future broadcasts failed to gain tractions. And of course, his instincts proved correct as radio really exposed the game. And, it's certainly how we consume a lot of sports talk radio games and stuff. And certainly, again, for myself, who loves listening to the game on the radio. It was interesting to hear that it was started in 1921 by Harold Arlen. So while he didn't know it, and I certainly didn't know it until researching this week, I'm very thankful for him that he brought that to the world, and so that we all can enjoy baseball today, certainly on the television, but on the radio, there's just something really, really neat about that, and something I know I thoroughly enjoy. All right. Well, let's close out here our show today. Next week we're going to do. We'll continue to look at the MLB races. Want to start looking ahead to football and soccer season, and even basketball and hockey, which are coming up right around the corner, which is really exciting, I think, for all of us sports fans. And if you guys like what you're hearing, please make sure you subscribe, like. Follow me. You can find me Winning Season SG on all social media. Just this week, we launched winningseasonsg.com. All the episodes are posted there. I started blogging this week, doing a podcast once a week. There's obviously a lot of things that happen during the week I have thoughts and opinions on. So I started a blog on there. So feel free to go sign up for that. And you can get it directly to your email as those get posted. We posted a couple this week, mainly around Tarik Skubal and certainly the Atlanta Braves, as we've talked through today. So appreciate you guys all listening in, and look forward to coming episodes and more of the MLB races as we wind down the season here. So look forward to seeing you guys next time, and we'll see you all on the other side.